Welcome back to Switch to Linux. This is Tom. So today we're going to have a look at how you can secure your online banking and your giant list of passwords securely. Now you can use OneDrive for this and do them both in one, or you can do two different drives, one for each option. But regardless, what we're going to look at today is utilizing the portability of Linux in order to create an extra secure system for banking and whatnot. So why is this important? Well, as we are browsing online, particularly if you're on a Windows computer, but you want to be cognizant of it even on a Mac or on a Linux, you want to be cautious about the sites you're visiting. But invariably, most people will end up with a computer virus at some point in time or another. Now, old day computer viruses would do horrible things to your systems, and there's even some right now that are crypto locking viruses that if they get on your computer, it locks you out of your computer. Those are dangerous viruses to get, so we want to watch out for what we're doing. However, a lot of your malware today is data collection malware before it is anything else. It is keyloggers. It is collecting a bunch of data. And some of the data that these are collecting is they're looking for, if you're getting on online banking, they're looking for what your passwords are. They're looking to find this information. Now, this is particularly also, if you look at the video I did a few weeks back on managing internet cookies, the banking that you do can actually be tied in with some companies as a means to figure out more about you, as a means to better sell you products you may not need. So what we're going to look at here is separating all of our banking and all of our major online shopping, and probably all of our online shopping. Now, obviously with online shopping, we're not going to talk about that in detail. But what we are going to talk about here is banking and passwords. So first, on to the banking. You want to make sure that when you are doing your banking, your computer does not have any malware on it. And it's also really good to make sure that as you're going to your banking and leaving your banking, that other systems can't see what you're doing. So some people try and use private browsing windows for that. And that actually doesn't work as well as many people would like it to. Private browsing can still share some cookies in between, and it definitely does not take any consideration if there happens to be malware on your computer. So what you need is a completely different operating system. But not all of us are able to go out and have multiple computers. So what we're going to talk about here is how to use your existing computer to create a ultra secure Linux distro just for doing your banking, or second option, just for doing your passwords. In my case, I put them both on the same. But of course, we all have these online accounts. So we got more and more and more online accounts every year. Every online account wants a complicated password with at least 8 characters and a capital letter and a lowercase letter and a number and a special character. It should be unique for each site, and you should change them every few months, and you're supposed to have them easy to remember. Probably a millionth of the population can do that. For the rest of us, we actually need to have some type of password management. Now, there's programs out there for password management, but there's some issues with those. So a good password management approach is you could print out a physical list of them and put them in a safety deposit box or in a safe in your house. Frankly, you have a greater chance of someone infiltrating your computer than you have infiltrating your house. So, you know, that's pretty safe. Now, the other option, if you do still want to keep it digitally, is you create a secure operating system that you do not have to remember multiple passwords. You just have to remember the 1 or 2 to get into there. So what my solution was, and I've been running on this for about 6 months now, and I love this option. This is a little USB drive that runs an entirely different Linux system. I can plug this into any computer in my office, except the Mac for weird reasons. I can plug this into any computer in my office, boot onto this drive, and it is a completely secure encrypted Linux system that I can use to do any banking and anything else involving credit card numbers transferring or banking information transferring, things like that. So this is specifically a Sandisk Cruiser. This is a 16 gigabyte drive. I want to say you can probably pick these up for like 10 bucks. Now this is a USB 2 drive. Now I've never had any issues with this USB 2 drive, and I did verify with the model number. It is a USB 2. This does not have any problems. But I wanted to test out this video on a few other drives, and every other USB 2 drive I worked did not work. So don't do this on USB 2. Sandisk must just be either really good or this drive is really USB 3 or USB 3 capable. I'm not sure. Regardless, this gives me no problems at all. And actually, my internal NAS system in my office also runs off of one of these. So I wanted to pick up a Sandisk drive, and since Black Friday was a couple days back, I found this drive for $12. I'm not even sure if it was on sale, really. This is a 32 gigabyte USB 3 Sandisk drive, and it has USB on one side and micro USB on the other. This is way fancier than I wanted. I just wanted to pick up another one of these cruiser drives in reality. They just didn't have any. Now, Linux, because it is portable, you do not need to have it installed on an internal operating system. This computer right behind me running OpenSUSE here is running off of another Sandisk USB 3 drive. I think it's a USB 3 128 gigabyte drive. And my Ubuntu system is on this hard drive. It's just an external USB 3 hard drive, a 1 terabyte drive. That is my Ubuntu computer. If I want this thing into Ubuntu for whatever reason, that's what I do. Plug it in, load it into Ubuntu. So what we're going to do is we are going to talk about how you can take this drive and install a ultra secure Linux distro. So by ultra secure, what I mean is we are going to first encrypt the entire drive itself. And then secondly, we are going to encrypt the home folder inside of it. So if somebody were to break in your house and steal this, or you take it with you and you lose it somewhere, nobody can access it because there's two different layers of encryption. They need to break through the first and they need to break through the second. And we're going to put some pretty ugly passwords on this drive. So don't forget this. If you get locked out of this drive, dishes are done. You're not getting back in. So we're going to talk about how to do this. So the tools that you will need today is you need obviously a drive. As I'd said, I've just had the best luck with Sandisk drives. I've not paid to endorse that, but I've also had these Pony drives. I think that's Pony or PNY, whatever that is. These things suck. I'll use them for data transfer, but operating systems, stay away. They're pretty bad. So we need a drive. And I want to say you can get away with an 8 gigabyte, 16 gigabytes generally the best. The smaller the better usually, because we're not going to want to use the extra space. We don't want to tempt you to store anything on there. However, if you do have things like family photos or stuff like that that you want to have on there, you know, have a larger drive and plan for that. This 32 gigabytes, this is like absolute overkill for what we're going to do. I'm going to do some other fun stuff with this drive later. In fact, a lot of our computers now, the lower ends are coming with that much memory. So that's kind of neat. As I'm looking at, this is actually the computer I'm going to use to install this. This is my Windows 10 computer, aka Evil Spy 10 on my network. These are just a little micro PC from Dell. I'm not going to do anything cool. I tried to do video rendering on these, not very good. Definitely could not do any VirtualBox stuff, but this is a very good computer if your sole purpose is to, you know, browse the net, respond to some emails, type up a few documents, take the pictures off your phone and stuff. Just a basic computer. These are great. These are really great, and they only cost, I think I paid $100 for this. So what I did though is I did take out the SD card, or not SD card, what is this, an SSD. These guys run, this particular model anyway runs on the SSD, so this is my Windows computer. I took this out because I don't want to accidentally overwrite the boot partition, anything like that, and break the operating system. That would be bad. Then the other thing you're going to need is any other USB hard drive that's probably at least, probably you want to shoot for like a 4 gigabyte at the smallest. And this poor guy here gets a different Linux distro on it every week. So it's been a trooper. I think I've had this thing for a long time. So that's all we need. A target drive, a drive with our basic information, and our Windows system to log this, to basically install this. So what I'm going to do here is, this computer particularly, it is one of the few computers I have in the office with a USB 3 port, believe it or not. I think I have USB 3 on this, on my main desktop here, and on my little portable computer. Most of my other computers are actually pretty old. They don't have USB 3s. So I'm actually going to use the ISO disk that has my Ubuntu install on it. I'm just going to use USB 2 port for that, and I'm going to actually be installing it onto the USB 3 port here. So what we're going to do is we're going to download the Ubuntu ISO image, and I will provide a link for their website. The reason I use Ubuntu, first I want to use a lightweight Linux system. I don't want anything fancy or dancy here. Secondly, I kind of want to make it, I think Ubuntu is a little uglier. It's kind of an older style. I want to kind of build a system that I'm discouraging any use in outside of it. Like mine's literally on for less than an hour a week. You know, whenever I'm getting online to do banking, budgeting, things like that, that's the only time that computer gets turned on. So we'll download our Ubuntu. We will put our Ubuntu on this drive. I'm not going to show you how to do that. I have videos about that. I'll link those in. And what I'll do here is I'm going to point the web camera at the computer because we're going to want to do some setup configuration items. I want to show you a few things in there before we jump into the system, and then we will walk through the installation. So here we are booted into the computer, and what I did is I spammed the F12 key so I can get up to the bootloader. Usually that is the key that's going to build you into your bootloader here. So ideally we want to, first thing I'm going to do is I want to go into the setup just so you can kind of see what we have. So what you can see here is there's two USB storage devices. We have a USB UEFI, which is the system we're going to load to. This guy here is just to make sure in case anything goes goofy with my Windows setup, this will always kind of force it into the Windows setup because it maps to a directory on the SSD, which is not currently inside of here. And then over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the BIOS setup. So you ought not be super concerned with the BIOS setup, but you know, look things up if you have questions about how things are working. So we are most interested in the boot options here. In our boot options, we have the boot list option, which in this case it will tell us that are we able to display UEFI or just legacy. And the secure boot, usually you might want to disable this, particularly if you're going to run anything in UEFI modes. I always just come in and disable those first. You don't have to. It's just going to make sure that any signed software like your Windows 10 install, in this case of this computer, will always work. It doesn't really matter to me. I can turn it on or not turn it on. And then I want to make sure that we have a legacy load option enabled because I actually am going to install this into our legacy. So our ISO image of Ubuntu has both a UEFI and a legacy option. And in that respect, then whichever one we load into, it's going to want to install in that method. So if I try and load into the UEFI option, then what's going to end up happening is that it's going to want to install that and try and add that to the secure boot, whipping out Windows, and that could cause some potential issues with your Windows 10 installation. We don't want to do that. So we kind of want to load this. We just want to come in here and just make sure that the load legacy option is an available deal. So I'm going to come over here and hit exit. Save and reset. And then once again, I'm going to spam the F12 key. So while I was talking there, I actually took out the second USB drive so I can find this faster. Otherwise, I might accidentally hit the other USB drive that was on that list. If you remember a minute ago, there were 2 options. I'm going to hit the USB storage device, and that should boot us into our Ubuntu. If it doesn't, then I'll go back. All right. So here it's giving us, this is our legacy load option. It's pre-selected to English. I'm going to push enter. Now what I want to do here is I don't just want to install it. Because we're going to encrypt it, we have to turn off the swap partitioning. So I want to hit the try Ubuntu without installing. While that's going, I'm going to plug my target drive back in. Okay, so my target drive is now plugged back in. This will not take too long to load here. So you'll see the first thing that happens is it gives us this solid navy blue screen, and then we'll probably see a little bit of code on the screen, and then now it's going to be booting into the system. And I have to figure out where I put my mouse. There it is. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to turn off that swap partition. So don't be too terrified, but we have to go into the command line. So I'm going to come over into the command line. In this case, it's there's just a little button for it. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was the terminal. Never mind. We can just go and find the terminal. It should be in here somewhere. And okay, so there's LX terminal. So what we're going to do is we're going to type sudo swap off. My keyboard's not quite working well. And 2 dashes and all. Jeesh. I have a really, really crappy Insignia keyboard. Not a very good brand here. Jeesh. It is not working. My keyboard is just being weird. I've never actually seen my keyboard do this bad. It's never good, but it's probably because there's a lot of radio interference between where the USB drive is and where the computer is to get it connected to the internet. A little goofy. I think that's probably just getting some interference from having to pass through a few computers to get there. All right, so now that we have disabled the swap partitions, we're going to come up here to the install option, and we are going to run the installer. Now, depending on the speed of your computer, this may be a faster process or a slower process. It's just going to totally depend. I will zoom in there and let me make sure our focus looks good. Okay, I have everything set to manual right now so we can see things a little better. So here we're going to go into our English, no problem there. Okay, so now we can choose the option to download the updates while installing. I'm going to go ahead and do this. This will save us a little bit of time after the install, but it will take a little bit longer to actually install it. Now, over here, the second box says install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware, flash, MP3, and other media. On a typical install, I'm going to want to check that box, because it enables the system to work well with any proprietary drivers, with flash, with playing music, other things that in 2016 we tend to utilize to a computer for. However, this is a secure thing. Operating system, I want to discourage any use of any external media. I'm not going to install this. Now, you might run into a situation if you have a lower end computer. You might have a proprietary driver or something such as a Broadcom Wi-Fi card. You will need to install some proprietary drivers to make that work if you want to connect via Wi-Fi. And I will show you how you can do that. The good news about Ubuntu is it has a very similar system as regular Ubuntu does, and that you can easily go in there and turn this option on in the settings later. So here, what it's telling us, I'm going to zoom out so you can read that whole message there. So it's telling us here that there is a partition that is mounted. So what this is as I plugged in the blank 32 gigabyte USB drive, when you plug it in, it automatically mounts it. This is just so that you don't have to do anything crazy to try and get a drive mounted. So it is right up here. We do need to unmount that. So we are going to say, yes, we want to unmount this drive. You'll see it disappears up here from the upper, if I am zoomed out all the way. There it is. So the drive was up here in the upper corner. It is now gone. So we're going to come back into the installer. So what we want to do in this case is we want to erase the disk and install. We're not going to worry about anything else that's on here. We are going to encrypt it. So I do want to encrypt the new disk. So we're going to hit install now. It asks us for an encryption key. I'm just going to put in a password that the system will say is strong. So it says, hey, that's a good password. And there you go. There is an option here to overwrite empty disk space. We do not need to do that. We're going to go ahead and hit install now. Now it's going to do a few little internal checks. If you did not turn off those swap partitions, this is where you will get an error. It's going to tell you about swap partitions being found. So in this case here, it pretty much says everything's good. It's going to make these changes. Do you want to proceed? We are going to continue. Do a few more checks, and then the next thing it's going to do is prompt us for our location. So time zone looks good to me. We're going to go ahead and hit continue, and then picking the keyboard layout, continue there. And then now we're going to put together our account name. So I'm going to say Tom. Now this one here, I'm actually going to pick a different system. I'm actually going to give the computer a super secure Ubuntu. Will be my name, SSL Ubuntu, okay? And then for my password here, I'm actually going to choose a different password as the previous one. Oh. Passwords do not match. I must have made a mistake somewhere. Let me try that again. I was on I think I was on a key when I should have been on my shift button or something. Hey, that looks better. Okay, now some of my systems I just have set into login automatically. In this case here, since this is going to be a banking computer, we are going to require the password for login, and we're going to encrypt the home folder. So you're going to hit continue. Okay, so what it's going to do at this point is it's actually going to start copying the files over. And so this, depending on the speed of the computer, the speed of your drive, the speed of your internet connection, this is going to take anywhere. It could take as little as 20 minutes, and it could take up to about an hour and a half or 2 hours, depending on how quickly it's going to download things, how fast your download speed is. And then also it's going to depend on factors such as how fast your processor is and how fast USB sticks read and write. In my case, I was running into the problem with the other USB 2 drives I had, just did not have the right speed to install. It was taking a long time to get them installed. And then once I actually got them installed, they had a really hard time running. That's why you want to use a USB 3 drive and on a USB 3 port if able. So I will come back in when this is done installing, and we will look at our next step. It's been running for about, I'd say only about 10 minutes or so. You're going to get this screen here as it's installing, just giving you a quick walkthrough. So, okay, well, I was going to walk through all those, but anyway, it's telling us it wants to restart or continue testing. I always like hitting the continue testing here, just because I found that the restart now sometimes hangs a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the continue testing screen, and we will go down to the bottom here and manually log out. I'm going to zoom all the way out, make sure your focus is decent enough. So if you have not been on the Ubuntu or the XFCE desktop, or actually I think it's the LDE desktop, it's just a very older style system, but it's completely comprehensive, very much like a Windows type platform. So here you can just come down to close out of the system, come down and select the logout. I'm sorry, I can't, let me see if I can zoom in and change the coloration a little bit just so you can actually see this is. I'm not sure you can or not. Now it's just because of the bright coloration here. Actually, let me adjust my brightness on my screen. I might be able to do that. There we go, there's a little bit. You can almost read what those are. You just come down here, hit the log out button, and then it's going to give you on the middle of the screen here, it'll give you a screen with the options to either shut down, reboot, suspend, hibernate, switch, log out, or cancel. We are going to hit the shut down. Our task here is we're going to close the computer all the way down. And then with the computer closed all the way down, we are going to reboot it into the drive. That will be right back when we're ready to go. I'm turning the computer back on. It should hopefully just find, okay, nope, it does not find it automatically. I'm going to reboot the computer. Depending on how you have your computer set up, it may find the USB. You might have to go into the USB drive there to actually log into it. Okay, so what ends up happening here is I'm going to zoom all the way out so we can see the screen. Because we have set the encryption so deep, when you first log into the computer, you are going to get this navy blue screen. If you sit here waiting for this, then you're going to be waiting for a long time. It's actually not going to do anything. Okay, so what it's doing is it is waiting for a password prompt. So depending on your computer and the graphics display, because those are slightly different, on this particular computer, every time I run this test, I get a completely blank screen. If I run this on any other computer in my office, what I actually should see on this screen is a password prompt. So I know it happens to be here. I'm going to hit the backspace a few times because when you hit the F1 key to come to this screen, it actually puts some information there. And I am going to type in my password, even though it is a blank screen, except I have to type it correctly. And then what will happen is once we type that is it is slowly decrypting the drive, and then in a moment here we will actually see the screen just changed there, and then it's going to boot into the system. So now it boots into our system, and now it's asking us for the second password we built. Now again, most of your computers, you are actually going to see information there. Now first it hits that navy blue screen. You have to push the F1 key on your keyboard, then you will see that password prompt. You'll actually see that there's a few stars all the way in it. So you want to hit the backspace a few times in order to do that. So the first time we load into the system, we get some information. So first we get this little box here. Oop, wrong button, I meant to zoom it. Okay, so we've already created our passphrase. Want to run the action now. This is going to open up a terminal window for you. This is where you're going to want to enter the encryption passphrase again. So what I generally am going to do is now depending on how you're doing it, you can use the same big passphrase you use to encrypt the whole drive, or you can use your account username, or you can come up with a third account altogether. I'm just going to, for the sake of this particular trial here, I'm just going to use my passphrase, the same one I use for login, you need to decide for yourself if you want to use a same one or a different one. So we run that action, just give that password. We're going to hit the close button here. And then it's going to, we are also going to get a software update. There's going to be a few software updates depending on things. Even though we did select to update, it doesn't update absolutely everything. So we're going to go ahead and install all of the updates now because we want to start using the system with everything up to date. So I'm going to hit install now. This is, it should prompt us for our password. And then once we enter our password, then we're going to let this guy go. And I'll be right back when we are ready to go. So here is the password box I was waiting for. Well, it's moving pretty quick here. Yep, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the video, reset the camera, and come back when we are ready to go. So the updates are finished, and the great news is the update actually fixed the login screen there. So now you don't get this solid blue. You actually have a password prompt here to sign in your password. So I think I got that right. I might have done that incorrectly. Okay, so that tells me that that is successful, so that is good. So that's awesome. The system now correctly shows us the password login box that we need. So now it is installing. So now on to the second password box. And then we will get logged into that. And now our system is ready to go. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to walk through just a couple of little things on the Ubuntu. First, the system does come pre-installed with a very lightweight Office suite. So it does have a word processor and it does have a simple spreadsheet program. If this spreadsheet program is, if this is not enough for you, then you can install LibreOffice. You can also install any other software that you might need on this for your work. You can find all the software packages. Let's see if I can remember where it is. I think it's under System Tools here. Let's see. So we have a software manager. Okay, so we're looking for the Ubuntu Software Center. It's under System Tools. And this will give us our interface where we can search for anything else that we'd like to install. So if you want like LibreOffice, just type in the LibreOffice up there. And then here I can find here is LibreOffice. So the way this works is you add apps to the basket. There's a button here. Let me zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. Okay. So here you just kind of add these to the basket, and then suppose you wanted to add something else to it, you could do this. And then you can hover over this, you can see what's in here, and then once you're inside of that app basket, then you will then be able to install things. So just a reminder that software centers are always pretty slow, just because it's going online, it's grabbing repository data and things like that. All right. So we're not going to bother installing anything. You just simply hit the install packages and that's all that would take. We're not going to worry about any of that. Now down here you can customize what's down here. We have a file manager. This will show you all the windows, and this guy here is the web browser. The default web browser on this is Firefox. So when you click on that, it will open up Firefox. Now, you might want to have a look at the video that I did on cookie management to decide what level of cookies that you'd like to install or allow installed. So, a couple of settings that I do. First, I'm not going to be a big fan of Google. They just collect too much information. So what I want to do is I'm going to do start page. is my preferred. Some people will prefer DuckDuckGo in the Linux community. I like Start Page best, just because I think it's a little bit more developed than DuckDuckGo, and I like its formatting and outputting better. So whenever you go to a page which has a search bar, if you check out over here in the search menu across from the URL bar, you'll see the magnifying glass has a little plus. That means you can add this page to these search engines. So the default's Google, there's Yahoo, Bing, Amazon, DuckDuckGo, Twitter, Wikipedia, and you can see down here the button that says Add Start Page in English. So we're going to hit yes, and then what I can do is right-click, and I can set as default search engine. Now you can also change search settings by clicking on this button here, and this will open up a new tab with the search settings. I'm actually going to remove some of these. I never want to use Yahoo. I hate the system. I'm going to remove it. I'm definitely going to remove Bing. If you're going to use this computer for shopping on Amazon, you might leave the Amazon. Otherwise, remove it. I will not be using it. As I said, I'm not a fan of DuckDuckGo. Don't want Twitter or anything else. So here I'm going to leave Google because there are times, in fact, you know what? I'm just even going to remove Google as well. Because this is not a computer, we are going to be doing any browsing the internet. So what we want to do is find the specific places we will be going. So maybe you will be going to Amazon. So we'll just do a quick search for Amazon. You could, of course, put it up in the URL bar. That's a pretty easy one. So if you want to go to Amazon here, and then I'm going to hold Control and push D to give me the bookmarks. I'm not going to just push the star because I actually want to put this on the toolbar. This is what I like to do. Okay, so actually we can hit Properties, and I just want to take out all this subheading there. I just want it to say Amazon. Okay, so I'm going to right-click to get started, delete that, right-click most visited, delete that. So you might go to maybe you do banking at Wells Fargo, and it was your opinion, not them creating you an account. You can go right to Wells Fargo's page, and then once again we're going to do the same. This time here I'm just going to go ahead and edit it before saving it first. Make sure it's on the bookmarks toolbar. Hit done. So basically what I'm going to do is all of the accounts that I'm going to do banking with, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add them to this bar. This way I never am going up into a search. I'm never putting things over here. I'm coming in here and I'm clicking right on this. This is in case somebody has taken over the search results or done anything goofy with the SEO or whatever else. I'm not going to be reliant on a web search to find the bank that I want to go to. I want to go straight there, and this is going to help me do that. Now the next thing we might want to do is we might want to look into what our add-ons are. So I'm going to come over to the upper right of the browser, find the hamburger menu. That's the 3 horizontal bars. Click on this. And I'm going to come down, well, first I'm going to have a look at the system preferences here. And what we're going to do is we can decide where things are downloaded to. You can set that over under the downloads part. What I'm interested in right here is I want to look at the privacy tab. Okay, so here, what I'm going to do is under the history, I don't like the remember history. It saves absolutely everything. Now you're going to need to decide for yourself, do you want to never remember any history or do you want to use custom? I personally like custom because there's some things I don't mind. I do not mind them storing a cookie on my site so I don't have to type in my password every single time I access it from this computer. But I never want to accept third-party cookies because that's somebody else sending tracking information back and forth. So you can choose to clear Firefox history, clear history when Firefox closes. I'll go ahead and turn that on. I do not like remembering search and form history. In fact, another argument for turning cookies entirely off is in the event somebody gets into one of these and you're not storing your passwords on this computer, then it's very possible that somebody could actually come in here, if you're remembering your form and search history and saving passwords, then they could actually still get into the system. Remember, there's at least two pieces of information somebody needs to get into your system. One of this is the username and one of this is the password. If they're stuck for both of them, it's a lot harder to get in. So these are kind of the custom settings that I like. That's kind of what I prefer. Most of the other items in here, I generally personally keep the same. We also want to have a look at add-ons. So we're going to come down here to add-ons. Now, even if you're opposed to ad blockers, you might consider running an ad blocker just because we want to make sure that we're not getting third-party cookies, any tracking information, anything that could potentially introduce malware into the system we want to avoid. Now, I do not use any ad blockers. What I actually use is a plugin called Policeman. And it is a little harder to use. My keyboard is lagging again. See if I got it this time. Okay, so I use Policeman here. What Policeman does is it blocks every third-party resource from a site, and it allows only the things from the domain URL that you are currently at to load. Now, there are going to be times when your bank uses third-party resources. You have to follow through the Policeman documentation to get that worked out right. So you might decide not to use Policeman. It's one I've chosen to use because of how in-depth it is. But for me, that's exactly what I want. It might be a little bit more advanced for some users, but that's one argument or one thing that you could install. As I said, you could install an ad block in case you'd want to do like an ad block plus or something to block out some third-party resources. And I don't necessarily always, I think that the use of an ad blocker is a controversial thing, especially on a YouTube channel that is, you know, ad sponsored. But at the same time, I think it's a personal choice. You know, some people run ad blocker because they have limited bandwidth and ads take a boatload of data. Some people want to run ad blockers because of all of the third-party data collection. You know, I think each one of us needs to come to this question on their own conclusion. But this is one you might want to run on this for that reason. Just anything we can do to minimize data collection and data sharing. So another plugin is, I think it's called Better Privacy. This is one that I had talked about in my on my video on managing internet cookies, because what the Better Privacy plugin does is it allows you to clear out the flash cookies, which are way more data collection ability than the basic browser cookies. So you might think about running this. Now, the downside of running this is if you are using if your bank, and most of them do, utilizes a extra series of, passwords and, questions and answers to keep you logged in. If you're clearing out all of these cookies every single time, you're going to have to answer all of those questions every single time. So again, that's one of those ones you need to decide, do you want to do this or not? I personally am not running Better Privacy on mine just because I do not, I don't use real data for those, and I don't think you should either. So the fewer times I have to go and answer those questions, the better for me. The passwords I always have to input, I don't save those. Although this is Linux, you can actually save any passwords in your keyring. So those are some of the setups that I do on my system here. Again, you can throw either a spreadsheet on your desktop, or you can go into your folder. I think this is the file browser here. So here's your documents folder. To get to the file browser, I went down right next to the menu there. I think on the menu there may also be, let's see. Yeah, there's the file manager right here as well. This will pull up the same thing. So you can store your documents in here. I usually just store them right on my desktop. So that is in a nutshell. Oh, I guess there's one more thing. Let's go into the system settings. I almost forgot about that. It's not applicable in my system here, but in the event you are running one of the proprietary driver requirements, like I do have one of my small laptops. This is real cheap, $100 laptop that I use just for some basic travel items. It uses a Broadcom modem, and so the Broadcom modems do not generally like to work. What I'm looking for is the settings, and I do not remember exactly where it happens to be. Although it might be under software and updates on this computer. Okay, yes, I think it is. So if you pull up the software and updates, which was under your preferences at the very bottom, it's a little obstructed by my screen. Let me bump that down just a little hair there. So down here under preferences and software updates, you pull this up. This is actually determining where you're getting your packages from. So you can see there's items over here. You can see what types of updates you're going to download. The one that is important for us right now is additional drivers. So if you click on this tab, it's going to do a search of your individual system and see if there's anything. This one here, I'm not sure if it's going to find anything. But if I were running this system on my little laptop, it would find the Broadcom drivers. If I want to get on Wi-Fi with that Broadcom driver, I have to use that. Otherwise, I have to use an external Wi-Fi dongle. So you need to decide for yourself what you're going to do. So in this case here, you'll see that there is a processor that I could use, which may boost performance. It may not. So let's see. This device is not working. Okay. So right now we can turn the device completely off, or I can turn this on, in which case probably would much better manage the computer use. So I might consider turning that on. In my case right here, this is just a test system used to show you how this works. So I'm not going to bother turning that on. Decide for yourself what you need to do to turn these on. I know on my, like I said, on my little computer, it usually pops up the Broadcom modem. I think it might still pop up the touchpad drivers. I'm not sure if those were implemented in the latest kernel or not. If you are having some hardware that doesn't work, check this additional drivers page. It'll give you a list of any of the hardware that you don't know, or that may be beneficial to run a proprietary driver. And the proprietary drivers is something that is fairly big in the Linux community. I'm not going to discuss it more here, but if you're interested in that, I'll talk about it another time. So that, in a nutshell, is how you can create a Linux drive, doubly encrypted, to run your banking and other secure and sensitive data. Again, this is running off of a small USB flash drive. You can, in my case, what I do is I just keep it on the desk. I keep the one major password that I know what it is. You can keep that password in a safety deposit box so you don't lose it. And then you can store all of your other passwords for everything else on that computer. So this has been Tom, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.